Mr. Chairman, we are now live.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, good afternoon and welcome to today's licensing committee. I'm Councillor Phil Barnett, and obviously the chairman of this committee. I'm supported today by members of the committee who are Councillors Paul Dick, my vice chairman, Councillor Billy Drummond, Councillor Nigel Foote, who's probably got caught up on something else, Owen Jeffrey, David Marsh, who's present, Councillor Stephanie Stevenson, who's present, Councillor Louise Sturgis, and Councillor Clive Taylor. At the moment, we haven't got Martha Vickers. She might be late, perhaps. Sean Murphy, I gather, will be attending shortly. Vicky Rigdon, I can see on Zoom. Hello, Vicky. And Riley Timoney, I gather he's stuck on the bus. I don't know whether it's local or whether it's further afield. We're also assisted by Mrs. Moira Fraser to the rear. And they are obviously the officers who will be advising this particular meeting. To my left, Ben Ryan is in attendance and he will act as clerk to this committee. And also we've got a Zoom host, the new Mr. Thomas Radburn. And welcome, Thomas. Members probably will realise we've got another member of the authority that probably will be assisting many committees. So hopefully you'll enjoy your stay at West Berks, Thomas. And I see also Stephen Chard in the rear. The meeting's being recorded, live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. At the moment, can I just ask, is it just Vicky that's on Zoom at the moment? Okay, thanks. Can I please ask everyone in the meeting to make sure you're speaking loud and clear, and obviously those at home as well, and also make sure that your mobile phones are on silent or aircraft mode or whatever you normally switch it, or even switch it off. Thank you. If we hear the evacuation alarm this afternoon, we must leave the building immediately. Please proceed via a safe emergency route, which will be shown to you by the trained officers present. And obviously follow any instruction which is given by those trained officers. I think most people around the table will be aware of where the Dolphin pub is, and therefore, like the subcommittee the other day, it's not likely to be people that don't know where the local pub is and where the evacuation route is. And obviously, if anybody is needing assistance, you again need to speak to the trained officers. At this point, any questions from members at all? Okay, and can you hear me loud and clear, Vicky?
I can, thank you.
Okay. Now, moving on to item 1 of the agenda. Apologies we've received, I think, from Councillor Jane Longford and Councillor Paul Kander. Is that correct? Okay. Welcome to you, Sean.
Chairman, can I just apologise? I was intending to be there, but having set off down the A4 to get there, I turned back. I thought it was better I join online than not be able to join at all. There was, I don't know what the traffic situation is.
Okay, right. Thanks very much. And I can also see Martha's on the screen. Can you hear me all right, Martha?
Yes, thank you. I must say I understood from getting the link that maybe we were all being asked to stay at home for meetings. So I could have got to the council chamber, but anyway, I'm here now, so I'll stay virtual. Okay.
Okay. I mean, I think the only thing will be, Martha, of course, you will get the opportunity.
I can't vote. No.
To vote. That's the only thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Moving on to item 2, which of course is the minutes of the meeting of the licensing committee that was held back in 6th of November. Can I ask for a proposal, please, for those minutes? Councillor Stephanie Stevenson proposing. and Councillor Billy Drummond seconding. Is everybody happy with those accuracy for those minutes? Can I have a show of hands, please? I take it you weren't present. Okay. Did you wish to have your name mentioned? Oh, okay. Thanks. Okay, Smash. Okay. Right. Do I need to sign a copy of those? Is that the original? Is it? Okay. Do you want me to on the back? Just on one on the back. Okay. Moving on, members, to item 3, declarations of interest. Have I got any declarations? I know Councillor Sturgis has in the past. Louise, was there any declarations?
Given the nature of what we're discussing today, no declarations from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? No. Thank you. Right, members, now we're going to move on to item 4, which is Hackney carriage tariffs for 2024, which referred to in the papers as pages 13 to 30. And I'm going to ask Moira Fraser to introduce the report. Moira.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. If this report seems somewhat familiar to you, it's because the considerations of tariffs has become part of the annual licensing cycle. The trade are asked to submit a proposal for any modifications that they would like us to consult on, with a view to introducing any changes as close to the start of the financial year as possible to assist them with their financial planning. To achieve this proposal, the trade needs to make their submission to us by October each year. As the submission was received a little later this year, it won't be possible to achieve the outcome of having it implemented by the 1st of April, as you will see from the timetable as set out in the report. As in previous years, officers are proposing that we undertake an informal consultation with the trade to establish their views before any formal decision is made. While this is an executive function, we usually start the process by consulting the licensing committee, who are the experts on this matter, and your views will be relayed back to the executive. In particular, we are seeking comments on the proposed modifications to the tariffs, the proposals around filing charges, and the consultation process itself. We would propose looking at the issue of locked time and calendar control on the meters via the licensing policy, which will be coming to the committee soon. In terms of the adjustments to the current tariffs, the original suggestion from the trade received on the 30th of November was an uplift of around 5%. The adjusted detailed proposal, as set out in Appendix B, would see a 2-mile journey during tariff 1 hours in a saloon car increase by around 3.02%. That is from £8.60 to £8.86. The trade are proposing that the flag charges remain the same and that the adjustments are made to the time and yardage attached to the various fares. Fares are calculated based on the distance travelled and time spent in the taxi. Trade is not proposing any uplifts to the charges for multi-seater vehicles carrying 5 or more passengers, or the tariffs marked as B on the chart. As always, we would remind members that the charges are the maximum that can be charged and would ultimately be up to the trade to decide if they wanted to increase their tariffs or not, should a change be agreed. In terms of the fouling charges, members will recall that this was discussed at length last year. And one of the proposals put forward was that we look into introducing a sliding scale relating to filing charges. There is merit in this proposal, as clearly it will be more difficult and probably more expensive to have a vehicle cleaned later in the evenings and on bank or public holidays than it would be, for example, at 10 o'clock on a Monday morning when all the car washes are open. The trade has included a proposal to this effect in their submission. Having looked at our neighbouring authorities, this is something that already happens, for example, in Basingstoke and Dean, Slough and Test Valley. Anecdotally, the trade has let me know that thankfully having to charge for filing or soiling, as it is sometimes referred to, is rare. It may happen once or twice a year to a driver and is usually alcohol related and most often occurs during the night shifts. This would be a matter for the operators and drivers, and which they would need to resolve with their clients should a charge be imposed. In terms of the consultation, the proposed route and timetable is set out in paragraph 6.1 to 6.7 of the report. The legislation requires that formal consultation cover at least 14 days and be set out in at least one local newspaper. As per the discussion on fees, officers are proposing that we once again put the notice in only one local paper, and that instead we ensure that the consultation is promoted via press release, social media, and it is placed on both the West Berkshire and Public Protection Partner websites, should members be minded to agree the proposals, and that the consultation would run from the 21st of March to the 4th of April. I'm happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Thank you, Moira. Right, okay, I'll take Councillor Stephanie Stevenson first and then Councillor Owen Jeffrey.
Yes, may I clarify, please, in paragraph 4.8, when the trade contacted us late on the 30th of November, the email sounds as if that person, I just wanted to touch base, has no idea that they're late and assumes that I believe should be in place by April 24, which they won't be. So there's some confusion. Why do they not realise that they were late and that actually with the timescale now, it won't be in place when they want it to be?
The timescales are not fixed. It's a request from the trade to try and have them in place by the 1st of April. And we have alerted them to the fact that given that we only received the request on the 30th of November and the formal update Appendix B on the 26th of December, that it won't be possible to get it in time.
Thank you. May I just ask then that they now know that and will make sure in future that they stick to the right date? Is that correct? If they want it in place by April, they will try and submit.
If they want it in time, the 1st of April, they would have to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chairman. At 6.3, Moira has drawn our attention to the concept that they just want, that officers are suggesting that we just post a public notice in the Newbury Weekly News. I don't know what kind of financial saving this would actually make. I feel very reluctant personally that we should only put it in the one paper, simply because in our area, it is both papers that really cover the entire area. Now, if you're about to tell me this is going to save £10,000 or £15,000, then I shall probably be silent. But I don't think we're looking at that sort of sum of money. Can I ask what sorts of sums of money we're talking about and what the officer recommendation is based on?
Moira.
So not 10 or 15,000 pounds, Councillor Jeffrey, but probably closer to about £1,000. And what the reason, sort of the thinking behind that, and ultimately this is up to members and members of the executive to determine, so no decision being made, is that the feedback that we tend to get, so last year we had 19 responses to the consultation. Not one of them was generated by the newspaper. They tend to come from the consultation panel and the trade who we would be writing to directly. So ultimately up to members to decide. It's just whether or not you think that putting it in both papers is going to achieve value for money.
So, Chairman, what I'm hearing is that we got to think in terms of £1,000 to put it in the one paper, £2,000 to put it in both papers. Can we not put a slightly smaller advertisement in?
I think if my memory serves me correctly, I think you missed one of the meetings where the discussions took place, Councillor Jeffrey, and I'm going to, before I come to the other requesting speakers and obviously the Vice Chairman, I think Councillor Clive Taylor, you made some observations, because I think we were quite concerned that you in your area representing the East could be one of the ones affected. So I don't know whether you want to just elaborate your views, what you said previously.
Yes, it Thank you. It's funny you should say that because I had this recollection that this had been discussed somewhere before. I couldn't quite remember in which meeting, to be honest. Yes, and I think I made the. I'm just trying to remember exactly what I did say, and I know I expressed concerns that we ought to be covering the east as well as the west, and I did suggest that we look in perhaps an alternative publication to the Reading Chronicle. I think it was the Chronicle that we were planning usually use, and I think there is a paper called. Is it Reading Today, which I thought might be less expensive to advertise in. I think that's all I can really remember saying at that meeting.
Thanks anyway. Just reminding us, because I know you did make a few
Yes,
observations. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Did you wish to come back at all quickly?
I'd like to express the view that I would personally be a bit concerned and definitely a bit disappointed if we didn't go into at least two separate publications that were going to cover the Newbury and West area and the Reading and East area. And if we can manage to do it a bit cheaper, fine. But I'd be disappointed if we didn't put it in writing in both areas.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Drummond.
Yeah, Moira's just told us that the trade is not obliged to charge the maximum fare, which I understand. Let's say I get a taxi and I agree a fare of £36 instead of £39. How do they get that in the meter? Can they put that new fare in the meter? Because it goes on to say on page 21, 5.7, that the trade is looking for us to agree on a lot meter. So I wonder how they get that new fare in there. Can somebody tell me that, please?
Are you able to answer that, Moira, or should go over to Sean at all?
Chairman, so just to say, it wouldn't be on a metered fare. If you agreed, you'd have to agree the fare before you went, and they wouldn't be able to charge you more. So if the meter runs and it goes over the amount, they wouldn't be. They can only charge you the lesser fee that was agreed beforehand. Or if the journey was a lesser fee, then you'd be charged that. But it wouldn't be locked into the meter, Billy.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Drummond.
Thank you. It's okay.
Okay, Vice Chairman, wish to raise a question.
Thank you. I want to go back to the question about the papers, because we had, obviously not everyone was here. We had lengthy conversations about this. It's tiny in the whole scheme of things and the amount of money we're talking about. What we were informed then was there were two papers as discussed. The feedback from either was tiny or almost negligible. And the authority said that it wanted to make more of an effort, like with the weekly bulletins and so on, to use more of the social media and online communication. And there's another issue, and that is one of the newspapers, which is much less effective than the other one, and it's not very effective at all anyway, is much more expensive. And we were mindful of that. That's where we got to at the last meeting.
Chairman, if I could also say that in terms of cutting down the advert, there's statutory requirements around the wording, so it's not possible to we put in the bare minimum to meet the statutory requirements.
Okay. I'd like to just formally welcome Riley. I thanks for your comments. I think you were stuck on a local bus somewhere.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, apologies for being late there, everyone.
Okay. Right. Is there any other comments before obviously I draw this little section to a formal vote on the recommendations which we've got laid out in front of us? Just looking around the table, don't seem to be any other comments. So what we've got to do, in effect, at 2.1, we've got to note the existing tariffs in Appendix A. 2.2, note the proposals laid out in the requests from the trade at Appendix B. 2.3, to consider whether any amendments should be made to the consultation process. I obviously haven't heard anything formally. And then obviously to resolve to propose to the executive that publication of the statutory notice appears in one local paper. So does that proposal meet round the table? And can I see a formal proposal to put that on record? I'm waiting to see somebody to put their hand up.
Chairman, so proposed.
So proposed from the Vice Chairman. Do I see a seconder? Okay, Councillor Drummond. All in agreement, please show. Okay, thank you very much. We now move on to item 5, which is variations to Hackney carriage and private hire vehicles and private hire operator fees, which is in the papers of 31, pages 31 to 44. And I turn to Sean. You can hear me okay, Sean, I hope?
I can, Chairman, and apologies again for not being there, but I suspect Riley was probably caught in the same traffic that I was, having left earlier. So, okay, just to run through the history of this. So this paper comes to the committee every year. Obviously, fee setting is a matter for full council in due course, and fees will be considered as part of the budget considerations of full council, basically in I think it's very early March, isn't it? So what we are required to do as a service is to propose a set of fees to each of the councils. So the process for doing that is that every year the budget for the Public Protection Service, the Joint Public Protection Service, is considered by the Joint Public Protection Committee. This year that meeting took place on the in early October, 2nd, I think, of October. And then we came to this committee with a view to going out to consultation on the statutory elements of the fees, where we are required to carry out a statutory consultation. So to just remind the committee, that consultation is required to be carried out with respect to the licensing of private hire and Hackney carriage vehicles and private hire operators. So the report sets out the consultation process for doing that. And that consultation ran from the 23rd of November to the 21st of December. So it met the requirement to have the 28-day consultation. Notice was played in the Newbury Weekly News. It was posted obviously on our consultation pages, placed in the reception at Market Street, and a copy of the notice was emailed individually to all Hackney carriage and private hire proprietors. So they're the vehicle licence holders, for their comments by the 31st. We received 8 consultation responses. Those are set out in the reports, in the annex to the report. So just running through those. So please do not increase fares as cost of living is already choking as it is. Many thanks. So there was one point I think there that in the report it makes is that we did actually reduce the fares some time ago, basically. I think it was 2021 or 21-22. And in fact, what was being proposed in this paper were lower than they were, in fact, basically at that time. So a number of other comments, responses 2, 3, 4, related to not increasing them at all. Response 5 basically referred to an issue around the CPI figure that we use. So the CPI figure that was used for the committee, the Joint Public Protection Committee, was a CPI figure from August, because obviously we need to take a point in time basically as a reference point. The suggestion was that it was 6.3. Now, there were obviously different measures of CPI, but the figure that we used was CPI of 6.7%. And in fact, it was CPIH, which rose by 6.3%. So moving on, the council, so one of the questions we had is why we don't consult on the rest of the fees. Well, obviously there's no statutory requirement to consult on the fees for drivers or any of the other fees associated with Hackney carriage and private hire licensing, with licensing regime. Obviously they're part of the general consultation that the council carried out on all fees, but we can come on to the issue of drivers' fees as well in due course. So further response 6 related to not increasing the fees. Point 7. There was an issue around basically training, disability training. Now that is something that I have picked up, and we are looking at that, and I will respond directly to the person that raised that. And point 8 related to basically whether we are actually carrying out some of the checks that have been raised. I have a meeting with the person who raised point 8, but just to say that we are planning to carry out all of the operator checks in Q4 of this year. I mean, there are some issues. There have been some issues about some of the checks in previous years, but we are planning to carry out this year's checks basically in this final quarter. And then the final point about not sending out reminders. As the committee will be aware, we have been moving to a new system, and there was a period where we weren't sending out reminders. I can confirm, Vicky, that we are now sending out reminders again, and we will continue to do so going forward. But ultimately, the requirement to reapply or to submit a renewal application obviously does fall to the operator. But that said, we have traditionally sent them out, and I'm pleased to say that we are now sending them out again. So that's where we've got to in terms of the responses. Now, clearly, Chair, the rate of inflation has fallen since August. So the August CPI figure or CPIH figure is 6.7 or 6.3, whichever you choose. The rate of inflation has fallen steadily and is expected to continue to fall into the latter part of this year. Obviously, the rate of inflation is only one indicator of the council's costs, but obviously, and things like wage, salary costs, and things like this maybe differ from the CPI figure. Normally, basically, normally there is a difference there, and obviously there are, in terms of private hire and taxes, there are also things like the costs of consumables, so plates and all sorts of other various things. So I guess where we've got to is that I think cognizant of the fact that that inflation has continued to fall, I guess the question for the committee is, do they wish to recommend to council a different fee structure? So by way of sort of background information, the council's overall discretionary fee increase for this year is proposed at 4.6%. Our colleagues at Bracknell, their discretionary fee increases are proposed slightly higher than that, I think around about 5%. So the question is, do we want to run with the corporate position at 4.6%? There is, what that would mean obviously is Moira has the figures, an adjustment to the hourly rate. So the way the fees are calculated, so if you take, for example, Hackney carriage or private hire vehicle renewal, that's based on 4 hours of the fee. What that would mean, basically, broadly speaking, depending on whether we round to the nearest whole pound for the hourly rate, would be an increase over the license period, or for the license cost of £12. So Moira, I don't know whether you're available to just run through, Chair, if you're happy for Moira to just run through what the figures are, then I think it would be helpful to get some steer from the committee. So is that okay, Chair? Are you okay?
Yeah, I think that's perfect, Sean. I think you've already set the scene and given quite a bit of information, which I'm sure will generate some questions, but I would imagine some of the questions could be surrounding actual figures, and if Moira's actually got some amended figures, I think it might be helpful. So Moira, over to you.
So, Chairman, In terms of the fees, if we went at a 4.6% increase, it would equate to an hourly rate of £66.94. If we went with at 4.8%, it would be £67.07. And I think it's £67 and about 18 pence if we went at 5%. So our officers are recommending a fee of £67 rounded as a rounded figure. If you then look at specific fees that we consulted on, as Sean said, that they're all based on an hourly rate. So, for example, the Hackney carriage vehicle fees would be £67 multiplied by 4. So we would see an increase of around £12 on the current fares are set out. I'm happy to distribute an entire set of all of the figures to members outside of the meeting, if that would help. But all of the so where it's £307, it will be. I'm just quickly doing the maths here.
Yeah, well, Moira's doing the maths. So obviously, Moira's talked there about rounding. Now, my understanding is that rounding would actually take the increase to 4.68%. So it's not a huge difference. And it's basically the rounding would be, I think about 6p, wouldn't it? It would make about, Moira, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the difference between it being rounded or not rounded is, I think, about 24p over the cost of a license. So it's not a huge difference. So I guess the question is, first of all, do you want to, in light of the feedback that we've had in the consultation, do you want to propose to council a different fee, a different hourly rate? In which case, do you want to propose the 4.6%, or do you want to propose 4.6% rounded, or do you want to propose something entirely different? I guess is the question. I don't know whether Moira's got her figures now.
I haven't got them in front of me. Sorry, Sean.
Okay, so Chair, I think that's a kind of summary of where we've got to. We've been out to consultation. The broad view is that there's two views. One of them is that they shouldn't increase at all. Now, clearly, obviously, the council's cost base is increasing. The second thing is that the increase is not in line with the falling inflation figure. And then there were a couple of comments or observations about other elements of the fees that I am following up myself.
Thank you. Right. I've got a question from the Vice Chairman to start with. I think before we actually get to the point of deciding whether we go for a figure for around the table, a specific question, is it, Vice Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, obviously we consult people. That doesn't mean they get what they want. But there's a very loud message from these consultees that they don't want the fees going up at all. And as the officer has said, that's not sensible or sustainable. But I wonder whether we shouldn't be moving a bit in their direction. And I wonder whether we couldn't look at the numbers again a little bit closer to decision time and strike a better balance between covering our costs, but holding a hand out to these people who are giving us a very clear message. I don't know whether that would help the officers with their calculations.
I think that's a useful thought, Vice Chairman. I think the only concern I had was that we still don't know how things are going to move forward in the near future in relationship to inflation. And I think the balance was already looking very closely at, there's been a considerable reduction of late. But also, I think officers are quite concerned that they want to make sure that they do balance the books, and we aren't further in deficit in any areas, and this would obviously be consideration. But I mean, if we were to consider, closer to the spring period, April period, we could end up finding that it's gone down considerably more in inflation terms. But we're still going to have to endure the extra cost, as Sean's already said, in relationship to consumables, and obviously increase in charges in hourly rates of the officer time. So we need to look at that as well. It was just food for thought, basically. Right, Councillor Stevens.
I'm not speaking against an increase at all, but I think response 8 is of concern. the person went to the Freedom of Information Act and discovered that of 61 operator licenses, only 29 had been carried out. Sean has said they're all going to be carried out in this last Q4, and that's good. But I'm concerned as to how we got into that situation in the first place. And is it going to be rectified permanently that we do not fall back in that inspection programme or whatever it was? Are we going to carry out our duties in a timely fashion?
I mean, I'm going to obviously ask Sean, he's got his hand up anyway, and I think it's correct and proper, but I think we also need to consider as a committee that we want to make sure that the adequate resources are put in the department. And of course, there has been obviously staffing difficulties of late. And we've had promises now that hopefully that would be overcome. So I'll stop at that point. Sean, do you want to carry on?
I think first of all, just to say I agree, the inspections in an ideal world should be carried out. So the situation there is as described. I am determined that we get those inspections done going forward. And as I say, basically, we have brought staff in from other parts of the service now to assist with those inspections. The situation has been really, the reason for it is staffing. It's as simple as that. We have struggled for some time now with the licensing service. I can't actually remember the last time we were fully staffed. Even as I speak today, within the next few weeks, we will still have 3 vacancies within the service that we're looking to fill. We've got an advert going out shortly to try and fill those, but it will include 2 licensing officers and somebody to help in the applications team. But this has been an issue for some time. And we have to basically, when we've got a situation like that, we have to prioritise those areas of higher risk. Now, a lot of the operators that we've got, in fact, I would say, the vast majority of all of the operators we've got are traditionally very good, but we should still be carrying out these checks. And as I've said, we are planning to carry out the checks this quarter, and I'll be keeping an eye on that myself. And in fact, actually meeting with this individual operator to discuss the concerns that they've raised. I've actually got a meeting in to meet with them next week. So going back to the point that the Vice Chairman made, I think the issue with fees is at some point, because obviously all of them basically are looking forward, and at some point we have to I suppose really choose an index point that we're going to use, and the council does that every year by necessity, and obviously this year, as I've suggested, that index point looks at 4.6%. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen. We know what the trend is, but for example, the things that play to that are things like salary costs and things like that, where we have an estimate as to what they're going to be, but they're based on data which is changing all of the time. And one of those things is obviously the CPI and inflation rate that sits around that. So time is running out. So I think these fees, any proposals will be going to council in the space of less than sort of 8 weeks, something of that order. And obviously the papers need to be prepared and everything else. But I suppose the other question I've got for the committee as well is it feels to me that if we are going to propose to full council that we change the base rate to say, for example, that in line with the council's other fees, which are 4.6%, that we probably should apply that to all of the discretionary fees. The same argument would run. So not just the ones that were consulted on. So I think one of the points that was raised in here was drivers' fees. So it feels to me that basically, sensibly, we would use that same rate as an index rate for the recalculation of drivers' fees. But yeah, going back to the original point about those checks, yes, they do need to be done.
Thank you, Sean. Sorry, you had another question, Vice Chairman. And
thank you. I do. And my colleague on the right here makes a good point about these checks. And we've heard twice now from the officer that they will be done. So that's really good. But I think we're missing the point here. This man, the point he's really making is saying, don't put up the fees because you don't even do what you should be doing for the money you get already. I mean, he was coming at that from a different angle. So either we members say to officers, we accept this level of fees and this increase, and we say sorry to our consultees, but there you go, or we ask the officers to look again. It's a very simple decision, I think. Thank you.
Yes, right. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chairman. In one sense, I suppose it's not directly relevant to where we are at this moment, but I am conscious that I can remember in the past that meetings of this committee or its predecessors would have a group of members of the licensed trade here, and they would certainly hear the discussions, even if they weren't able to directly contribute. And they have officers of the association. I noticed that we're here on our own. Do we actually invite them to be present?
We do. They had the opportunity, correct, Moira? Obviously, we would have had to suspend standing orders if they wished to make any observations. But I specifically said at the beginning of the meeting, if you remember correctly, who we got on Zoom, and we didn't have anybody. I don't know whether you want to make any more comments. I see your hand up, is Sean.
Yeah, I think it's an old hand, but I'll pick up on that question. So basically, Councillor Jeffries, we do actually have separate meetings now with the trade outside of these meetings. So there is a liaison group that the chairman attends, and some of these discussions that take place around a whole range of issues, from policy through to fares and fees and things like that. And the outcomes of those meetings, as Moira will know and the committee may recall, are fed back into this meeting. There is nothing to stop the trade turning up today. It was a public meeting. There's nothing wrong with them requesting. There's nothing to stop them requesting to speak. But obviously, which they haven't obviously exercised that right today. But we do have an ongoing dialogue with them, and as I've already alluded, I have meetings with sort of individual members of the trade as well coming up in the next few weeks. So yeah, I don't know whether that helps the committee.
Sorry, did I see your hand?
Yeah, so Chairman, just to say, it's a public meeting, so obviously any members of the trade and the agendas are published, and they do know about the dates. In terms of the Hackney carriage fees, I have had a chance now to look them up. So the proposal, if the fees were set at the £68.25 or the 6.7%, was the £307 for a new licence and £273 for a renewal. If members were minded to go to the 4.78 or the £67 rounded up, that would be £301.50. So a difference of £5.50, and on a renewal, the difference is £5, so or £268.
Thank you for that information. I think the next one on the list was Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I see that there were 8 responses altogether from the taxi trade. I mean, what would be the maximum number of responses that we could have had? What is the size of the taxi trade? Because I must admit, as a relative newcomer to this, I have no idea how large a what is that 8? Is that 8 out of 100 or 200 or 8 out of 10 or 20?
Closer to 300. There's 71 operators, for example. I know that because we had a discussion about operators earlier today, but and around 250 drivers. But 8 is a much higher. It's double the number we had last year. So last year we only had 4 responses to this particular
but just to be clear, it's 8 out of
probably about 300.
About 300, okay. And can I just also check that these responses are just from individual taxi drivers, or are these representative of, could some of these responses be representative of other people as well?
So all the respondents responded as individuals.
As
We
in-
do have bigger taxi companies within West Berkshire.
Yeah.
A couple of co-op kind of situations. This year, in the past, we've had the co-ops send in representations on behalf of the committee, on behalf of their members. But this year there were 8 responses from individuals.
From individuals. Okay, thank you.
I've got you, Councillor Marsh. Councillor Sturgis, I think you were next on the list.
Councillor Taylor just asked my question, so
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a general question about fees, really. I was a member of this committee from May 19 to May 23, and then I've just had a short break and I'm back on the committee. I'm very happy to be here. For most of that time, meetings of the committee, we discussed ways to encourage greener vehicles, including on several occasions reducing license fees for companies that operated electric vehicles, for example. In fact, I rather thought that at one point Councillor Abbs, who was then a member of the committee, and myself actually, I'm pretty sure we actually agreed in principle that we would do something like that. But I can't see any mention of this anywhere. Does that mean we've actually made no progress with this? It hasn't happened. I just wondered about that.
I think you raise an important issue, and I see a nod at the head with Sean. In fact, he's put his hand up now, so I think probably it's appropriate. But Sean that quickly responds.
Thank you, Chair.
So yes, they're not included. I don't think they're mentioned in this paper, but yes, the fees were actually mitigated in respect of low emission and zero emission vehicles. So currently, those vehicles get 100% rebate on the fee if they're zero emission, if they're all electric, and they get a 50% remittance on the fee if they are effectively hybrid vehicles. So that was introduced. Vicky, I don't know whether you're able to remind me what period that's for, or Moira. I think it was more than 1 year.
So it was a 3-year period, Sean, and we're into year 2 of that. So and we look at it every year. So Councillor Marsh, that will be included in the annual review that comes to this committee again at the July meeting.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, right round the table. You've obviously now been presented some evidence to support these percentages, and I hope you take note of the actual pounds and pence being mentioned by Moira. So I'm really looking for a conclusion to which specific route you wish to take, whether you wish to take a higher percent than what some has been mentioned, or whether you wish to reduce it or go for a percent which is very similar to or exactly the amount that was being proposed initially when it's first laid out. So
Can I just check, Chairman, the lower figure, and we're talking not a few pounds here, but you know, every little matters or whatever. Is that would that bring it in line with the inflation of other fees generally? Is that
yes? So I think yes. I suppose the alternative proposition to the fees that's set out in the paper is effectively to bring it in line with the 4.6%, which is the council's general fee proposal for next year. I mean, inflation is still falling, but the council's cost base isn't necessarily the same as inflation, if that makes
understood.
sense.
I just wanted to check that, in which case I would propose we do that. There's all sorts of logical things there, and it gives these people a little bit of succor, but still balances the books. That I would so propose, Chairman, if that's helpful.
okay. But thank you, Vice Chairman. Looking around the table, does that meet with your agreement, Councillor Jeffrey, for seconder?
Seconded.
Okay, and round the table, does that meet with majority or everyone? Okay, thanks very much. Obviously, I think that would be very helpful to assist both you, Moira, and Sean. The only we've obviously agreed it now, but can I just ask a point? Obviously, we might be just 1% or 2% out of sync with another authority, but you can't see that being a problem.
It doesn't. I mean, Chair, it's obviously the cost base, because effectively we are all West Berkshire employees and everything else. Each authority has its own fee range. Can I just check one thing with the committee? We're looking to apply this across all discretionary fees for licensing, is my question. I assume that would be the plan, that we wouldn't just take one section which is subject to statutory consultation, but we would apply it to all discretionary fees, which are primarily, there's a range of them, but they're things like street trading. It would include driver licenses for taxis and private hire, and areas such as animal establishments. Can I just seek a steer on them?
I'm just looking around the table, and that's my understanding, but
Yeah,
I'm just
okay.
wondering whether. Okay, Councillor Stevenson, are you querying that
No,
point?
yeah, because I'm not sure I was really considering street traders.
No, I think what I'm saying is, if as a matter of principle, that if we're going to revert to the council's proposed rate of 4.6%, this is then it really. I guess my question is, it should really apply to all fees, and I'm asking if the committee agrees with that, rather than just pick out the ones that have been out to statutory consultation.
I think, Councillor Stevenson, I think from transparency and easier operational for our staff, that we're trying to make sure that they are able to undertake some of the requests and requirements, it will be easier for the department to operate a standard percent across the board. Is that what you're going to support, or you've got an alternative?
Sorry, Chairman, but thank you. Kind of. What happened here is that officers proposed a certain level of fees and the rationale, and we've seen a consultation, and we've said nearly but not quite. And the fact that we're matching other inflation figures elsewhere gives it a certain logic as well. Now, if the officer is saying, actually, we ought to be applying 4.6, I think that's the number, isn't it, across all other fees, if that's his proposal, then we can respond to it.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm proposing. Basically, are we going to apply them to all of the discretionary fees that basically, because don't forget, when we came here in October or November, I think it was November, we did set out all of the discretionary fees before the committee, and all of them had a 6.7% increase. So what I'm saying, Vice Chair, is logically, if it's accepted that the proposed cost base for these particular fees is 4.6%, logically it would make sense to look at resetting them all at 4.6%.
Looking around the table, Sean, Moira, I see this nods right the way round, because I suspect Moira might well have asked me to have revisited it and come for another vote. Is that correct? But I think in the way of nods, I think we need to say that we're happy with it, and we'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. I mean, I see Councillor Sturgis just looks a little bit concerned, but hopefully you're in agreement. Is that correct?
Yeah, broadly, I think it's a sensible proposal. I guess I was just thinking through what the financial implications were of that, because we haven't seen consolidated figures. So does that leave the department or the council significantly out of pocket if we're going to apply the 4.6 figure across all those other areas?
Well, I think the way to look at it, Councillor, is, if I may, Chair, is that obviously if inflation had gone into next year at the kind of rates we were looking at previously, that would have clearly impacted on potential things like salary claims and things like that. If inflation is falling, then that will also have an impact. As I say, it's not the only thing that feeds into our base costs, but actually the reduction in inflation will feed through basically into the cost of running the service to an extent. So my feeling is, and my advice would be, that it is a logical move.
Thank you.
I'm conscious, Councillor Vickers, Martha. I keep looking on the screen to see if you got your hand up, but I haven't seen it, and I hope.
No, that's okay. I'm listening to the discussions. That's fine, and there are a variety of opinions. I haven't got any particularly strong views, but I've sort of listening to all the points that have been put forward and the discussion. So yes, as you say, I haven't got a vote because I'm not there, but I don't think I have any particularly strong views. I suppose if I had any views, it would be sort of a bit of concern that the charges themselves and the impact on the community, because it does seem the charges do seem quite high. But I understand, you know, that the cost of keeping the taxis running and all the various things that go with it are high. But one knows that a lot of people are dependent on taxis because we have such poor public transport. So that would be where I'm coming from. But that's probably not something we can be discussing at a great extent now.
Okay, thank you. I obviously didn't want to broaden the discussion, but I just felt I ought to at least give you the opportunity.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm sorry I'm nice and warm and cozy here and not with you, but sorry. Anyway, thank you for bringing me in, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, well, you could be rest assured it's not that warm in here, but still, that's another story, Martha. So we're now moving on to item 6, which is minor changes to the licensing policy, which have arisen since the amended S182 guidance, which refers to pages 45 to 60. And I'm handing over to Moira again for you to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chairman. Members will recall, as the Chairman just pointed out, that we considered the new licensing policy at the November meeting. Shortly after that, on the 18th of December, the government issued new Section 182 guidance. We hadn't had new Section 182 guidance, I think, since 2014. And then in last year, I think we had 4 changes to the guidance. So every time I print it for you, they now proceed to make some changes. The changes are relatively minor and they relate really to the issue of spiking, of drink spiking or people being spiked within licensed premises. Officers are therefore proposing that we update the policy. If you will recall, members, we did include a provision in the last report that minor changes could be agreed by Sean and the monitoring officer in consultation with the chairman and the vice chairman. But as we have a meeting now, we thought we'd bring it to the committee as a whole. What we'd be doing is to include additional information around the operating schedule that applicants need to submit when submitting a licensing application, which they need to set out how they would combat spiking and procedures for preventing and dealing with spiking, and training for door staff to raise awareness around spiking as well. And it's also proposed that we just update the glossary to include the definition of spiking as set out in the Section 182 guidance. So they're very, very minor changes, but we just think that it's a very topical issue. It's a very important issue, and should therefore be included in the licensing policy. With the Public Protection Partnership is also looking at wider kind of partnership arrangements. We work closely with our colleagues in the Pub Watch, Thames Valley Police and the licensees, as well as at those Pub Watch meetings. And we continue to raise awareness around drink spiking. Remember, if you, and I do hope all of you are signed up to our Facebook and Twitter accounts, that we put out some messaging over Christmas around spiking, and we have an ongoing campaigns where we promote and put up posters within our licensed premises around this important issue as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions tomorrow? Right, Councillor Stevenson.
Sorry, I'm asking questions all the time. I don't want to be frivolous, but Maura, can we look at page 53, the first of these lovely flyers? Because I believe people actually read them, I think we shouldn't be saying on line 4, do not go out alone and stay with your friends. You know, you've got to have, do not go out alone, full stop, stay with your friends. What you're telling them to do is don't go out and stay with their friends. Can we just alter that, please? Otherwise, they're all lovely. Thank you.
No, you take note of that comment. Thank you, Mark. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. You'll be disappointed to hear that I have nothing whatsoever to say about this item other than I think it's excellent. We should support it completely. Thank you.
Thank you for those positive notes, Vice Chairman. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I just wanted to raise one issue that's right at the end of the report, 6.3, about vaping. I understand, good to know if that's actually going to happen, that the government is going to provide funding and a policy on this. I just wanted to mention that, I don't know if other members do, but I get quite a lot of comments from residents about this. There are concerns about, particularly near schools. I mean, I've got a son myself who's 11, who's at St Bart's, and I know that other parents are concerned about the availability of vaping, and we've got a vaping shop in my ward, which has led to certain concerns. And then there are environmental issues such as the disposal of millions, literally millions of one-use or single-use disposable vapes. So I think this is an item that I would be very interested in us having a discussion about when we have more information at a subsequent meeting, perhaps, because I think our residents are very interested in it and have certain concerns about it. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for those comments. Do you want anything you wish to make comments, Moira? I'm just looking at the screen. Were you all? I could see you, Councillor Vickers. Were you hearing Councillor Marsh? Okay.
Yeah, no. I mean, I just wanted to make a comment.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Councillor Vickers, Moira, did you wish to make any comments?
So, sorry, Chairman. So the reference that Councillor Marsh is making is onto the next item, but we're happy to take questions on that now or later as you choose.
So, sorry, I tried to wrap it up in one. I approve of what we've been saying about spiking, and then I was reading on and remembered I wanted to say something about vaping as well. Apologies for that, Chair, but we've covered both of them to my satisfaction.
Moira's offered to respond now, so I think it's fair and reasonable.
I'm sure Sean will have something to add as well. But we're doing a lot of work at the moment around underage sales, and also a lot of messaging. There's new regulations around the disposal of the lithium batteries, and requirements around institutions that sell these products to be able to, in much as the same way that you can take batteries back to wherever you're buying them, that they are now having to install bins where they would be taking back the lithium batteries. That's supposing, of course, that those people that are using them would choose to take them back, but they are obviously a source of litter, but also causing problems and fires in our refuse bins and things as well. So there is quite a lot of social messaging that's going out around the single-use vapes and how we dispose of them as well.
Okay, are you happy with those?
Yes, and I'm sorry to have jumped the gun, as it were, and moved to the next item a bit early, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Sean, did you wish to make any more observations on that subject?
Just to say that obviously the trade play a very big role in this, and it's good to see that effectively the Section 182 guidance has been changed to cover this, and it sounds that we are the committee is moving towards basically including it on our own policy. It is an issue of our time. Talking to police colleagues, we don't think it's a particularly big issue, but actually what we don't know is things like levels of underreporting, and we don't know basically whether it is that bigger issue than is reported. So what we are doing is, as Moira has already talked about, we work very closely with the trade through Pub Watch. There is a police-led initiative around this whole thing about safer streets and protection of women and girls from violence, and we are contributing to that debate on a regular basis and working with our licence holders basically to try and encourage good practice. So we have other things in mind going forward. if the committee is minded, actually, it may be something that we could perhaps, because I do think sometimes it's helpful to have contextual things on the committee agenda, and we've got one at the last item. Whether basically it may be helpful to see whether we could come along with our colleagues from the police and just update the committee on some of the work that's been done in this area.
Good.
Clearly, it's also a public health issue as well, a wider public health issue. And in fact, actually, just on the point of vaping that Councillor Marsh has raised, there is actually, we are planning to take a paper to the Health and Wellbeing Board as well around vaping in young people. But if the committee are minded, I can certainly speak to police colleagues and see whether we could put something onto the agenda to have an update on the whole safer streets issue.
Yeah, so I think we come back and talk about that obviously at the end of the meeting. Councillor Vickers, you had a question.
Yeah, well, I was yes, I was initially wanting to comment on the spiking thing, mainly just to say that, you know, this is important information and the posters are very useful, and maybe we could circulate them among all our colleagues, not just people on this committee, so they could hopefully within their areas maybe pass them on to parishes and other people where they could be displayed. I think if we've got information like this, it might be useful to just pass it around all our colleagues. And also we've got the substance misuse harm reduction group meeting quite soon. I don't know whether this information and these posters will be sort of included in that agenda, just to so that we know what the council is doing as regards you know, this particular subject, because it, you know, I'm not quite, I would have thought it would come under that group, or although it's more to do with the sort of liaison and involving young people, but I would have thought it was appropriate. And yes, good to hear the discussion on vaping, and I hope we will be liaising with our people that are working with young people, such as people at the waterside or youth workers, and maybe, you know, trying to get the message out and getting the views of young people about what their understanding is going on here. But it's looks like important work, and it's good that it'll be coming. A report will be coming to the Health and Wellbeing Board.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Vickers. I see Sean was nodding his head. I don't know whether you want to make any comments to.
Well, I mean, just to say that you know, good law has context, doesn't it? And this is exactly, if you look at the aims and objectives of the Licensing Act and the licensing objectives themselves, this is the kind of thing basically that you know, we need to be looking at and working with those that we license, and working with partner agencies and everything else to encourage, and in particular working with the community to encourage awareness and understanding of risk and how you manage that risk. And you know, so it's an important area. Just you know, it's good to see it in the 182 guidance, and if we make the adjustments to the policy, I think it'll be good to have it in the policy as well.
Thank you, Sean. I'm obviously conscious that we moved quite a bit of information in relationship to item 7, but we've obviously need to make sure that we've gone through the correct procedure in item 6. And obviously I need to get a resolution that we need to resolve to authorise the service lead, public protection, in consultation with a monitoring officer and myself and the vice chairman of the licensing committee, to amend West Berkshire licensing policy to reflect the changes in the section 182 guidance. So obviously I need to get a proposal for that, and I see the vice chairman's proposing and Councillor Jeffrey is seconding. Can I see everybody in agreement to that, please? And then we perhaps can move to item 7. So other than what we've already been mentioning in relationship to the points which were relevant to the community alcohol partnership, Sean, is there any other further things that you wish to make, or does Moira wish to make any comments in that direction that we haven't already heard?
Chair, if I can, so just to pick up, so we've had a long involvement in terms of underage sales of alcohol, and very early on we realised that obviously tackling the enforcement element of this was only ever one part of the picture. That to look at basically issues around, in particular in this case, alcohol, underage drinking, it had to be looked at from several aspects. So there was the issue of obviously license holders and compliance with the law and everything else, but there was also the issue of informed decision making, of making young people aware, and the vice chair, as a former head teacher, will know that some of that work that we've been doing for very, very many years, and in his former school as well. So this has been a sort of, over the last few years, we started off with this community alcohol partnership arrangement. We originally ran it in Tylerhurst and Calcott. And Thatcham, in fact, were the two areas basically where we ran it, where there had been previously issues identified around young people and alcohol. So not to say that there aren't issues everywhere, but they were the two areas that we looked at initially. So we are now proposing to, or we're now moving to extend the partnership arrangement to the whole of West Berkshire, and the aims and objectives of the partnership are there. And primarily what it is to reduce, it is to ensure compliance with the law, and also to assist young people really to make informed decisions. I mean, it's a legal product, it's a regulated product, and we just want to make sure that basically that compliance is high, and knowledge is available as well to young people.
Okay, thank you for that information, Sean. I have a question from Councillor Drummond.
Yeah, the first one is, are you getting enough volunteers for the Challenge 25 test purchasing?
We do actually, yeah. So obviously that's an easier one to get volunteers, but we still also manage to get volunteers as well for the underage test purchasing. So there are two different types. We do the Challenge 25, which is awareness raising, and then we do basically the out and out enforcement test purchasing, which is obviously where we use people under the age of 18. Thankfully, in relation to the latter, what we have seen over the years is compliance steadily increasing. I mean, the first time we did test purchasing years ago, basically the compliance was really quite poor. Now, basically, a sale to somebody underage is quite rare.
And the other one is 4.2, the last two lines, safeguarding and the reduction of violence against women and young children. There's no mention of young lads in there.
No, it's a really interesting point, that, and it's something that I've raised as well. I mean, there has been a wider initiative around reduction of violence against women and young girls, but you're absolutely right, Councillor Drummond, actually, that the risks are there for everybody, and certainly, basically, when we roll out discussions about those risks, we will make sure that everybody is included basically in the cohort of people that are subject to any kind of risk. It's just that was mentioned because obviously that's an initiative that is being rolled out more widely.
Yeah, just I know a young lad who was raped.
Yeah, I know. I and it's not to say that they wouldn't be subject to. Yeah, no, it's a really important point. So I'll make sure that basically that message is clear in all of the initiatives that we do, that effectively we're talking about the risk to everybody.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions on this subject at all? Councillor Stevenson?
Yes, can I just ask if, in a very naive way, are we doing test purchases for vapes already?
We are. So, I mean, it's interesting because obviously a lot of the focus has now gone on to vapes. I mean, at one time, basically, when we first started work around test purchasing, a lot of the focus was on tobacco. We know that tobacco consumption has gone down. Then there was a lot of focus around alcohol. We know that compliance is up there, basically, but consumption, obviously, harmful consumption we're talking about here basically is potentially still a risk for young people. And then moving on, vaping has become the issue of our time. So there are a number of enforcement areas in relation to vapes. So one of them is obviously the type of vapes. So we have made a number of seizures across the areas that public protection covers for trading standards of illegal vapes. So these are ones where the nicotine levels are too high or there's too much basically in there. And we have seized several hundred, probably thousands of items like that. And then we have routinely carried out test purchasing. I can't tell you what the figures are in terms of compliance. What I do know is we have had one or two prosecutions in the past around underage sales of vapes. And I know that there are occasionally breaches detected, but I can get that information for the committee if it would like that and circulate it offline.
No other questions on this subject? Well, thanks very much for the background and update, Sean. I've now got a comment from the chair, which is not technically part and parcel of the agenda, but I think it's very relevant in relationship to what's going on at the moment. Many of you are aware that we've had a series of subcommittees looking at various licenses, and there has been a lot of issues raised. The subcommittees have seemed to be all of a different level, and they come in at different, let's say, different sort of discussions for a variety of reasons. But the discussions I've had post these subcommittees with the officers, what was flagged up was that some members perhaps were not totally conversant with the particular application and the location and the complexity of the application. So what we were wondering whether it would be appropriate to consider site visits on a similar line of what we already carry out for planning. And really, it's just flagging up with you members to see if there's any views on that particular suggestion and whether you would feel that it was appropriate to consider discussing with officers to see if it could be actually implemented. Looking around the table, Councillor Drummond.
Yeah, I would support that. I think it's a really good idea.
Councillor Taylor.
Likewise, it is something I'd thought about. I've certainly not something I've raised with other members of the committee, but I think that's an excellent idea.
Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. The ones that I've been involved in, I've gone myself and had a look. I was conscious of the fact that I don't know if we're talking about something organised and therefore more officer time and yet another burden and getting everyone together and all that kind of thing. And I don't know how it looks as well if there's a gaggle of people, but all I would say is, personally, I found it very, very helpful. It's not onerous. It's not onerous at all.
I think the comments you made, Vice Chairman, are very relevant in relationship to resources, officer time, and obviously if there's cost implications. But that's something that perhaps when we have the opportunity to discuss it with officers, we can see whether there is any implications that can affect what you've just said. Okay, thanks. Right, Councillor Steve.
Yes, I'm very glad to get the opportunity to comment upon this, because at that meeting, which seemed to me to raise issues that had never been raised before, I don't think a site visit would have sorted some of them out. For instance, I cannot believe that in over 20 years we've been a licensing authority. The question of whether the ward members' comments should be conveyed to the applicant beforehand has never come up before, but it came up at that meeting. And even two members, myself and another councillor, totally disagreed on whether the applicant should see the ward members' comments or not. I think we need a definitive answer from the legal department as to whether the applicant should see beforehand what the ward member may be saying at the meeting. Can we have a ruling on that, please?
Councillor Stevenson, I think you're actually moving in another area which some of us are concerned about, and that is the protocol and procedure. And your colleague, Councillor Jeffrey, obviously has got his own views on proceeding, and I think we perhaps need to look at that separately. We're talking today specifically on site visits, and I think that's the point that I'm trying to address. I think if we're in agreement, we will need to take it away and to talk about the legal implications, obviously the staffing, the resources, and obviously the costing. But I'm looking around the table just to gauge the views, and so far it seems to be given positive vibes, and I would hope that I'd be able to go to the officers and actually talk about the implications of this in relationship to your issues. I think that's a separate issue. We will need to address that separately. Other members, any other? I see. I'm going to take you in a minute, Councillor Vickers, as soon as I've addressed everything around the table. Right, Councillor Sturgis.
So just to say, in principle, yes, I think that would be a good idea.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Vickers.
Right. Well, I mean, I think my reservations would be about resources as well. And also as regards planning, if you don't go to the site visit, it's sort of considered that that somehow your opinions are less valid at the meeting because you haven't attended. I think they're almost compulsory when it comes to planning. I'm just wondering whether that might be, whether that's particularly as licensing isn't treated in the same way as planning, particularly as regard the ward's members, and that is something I feel quite strongly about myself, and I don't really understand that if you're going to have those sort of similarities, maybe you need similarities across the board. I think I think sometimes a site visit might be necessary, but possibly it's not always necessary. So maybe we need a bit of flexibility about whether we call a site visit for everything. It's not really necessary all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're trying to obviously look in the planning direction, Councillor, because we've always accept it as a beneficial, not mandatory, but a beneficial. And I think I would hope that it would, if it was a route that we actually went down, it would be deemed to be a beneficial and not actually a mandatory requirement. That's all I would say. Right, Sean, you wish to comment?
Sorry, Chair. Just to say that in light of the discussion that the committee's just had, I just wonder whether basically we go away and look at, because I think there are options around this. It may not need to be every meeting. We need to look at whether there's any changes are needed to the constitution basically around this. I suspect not, but there may be. I just need to check with, we need to go through with our colleagues from legal, and we come back with a set of proposals to the committee on a way forward, or a set of proposals that you can consider and make a decision around this. I mean, it may well be that they're not needed for every license application, but for some it would be desirable. And I think then you're back to, whether attendance is compulsory and all of those kind of things that Councillor Vickers has kind of talked about. The good thing about licensing is you can get the committee or the subcommittee in one car, which is an advantage. So, but we'll go away, get some proposals together. The committee are minded to ask us to do that and come back with a fully worked up set of options.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful. Before I bring in Councillor Stevenson, you wish to make a couple of comments, Moira?
Yeah, Chairman, I think that section 13, part 13 of the Constitution's got all the protocols associated with the different meetings. And I know the planning policy site visits is referred to in that. So I think that's the section of the Constitution that would need updating should the committee be minded to make those changes. But we can bring a report back to the next meeting, having discussed it with legal first.
Okay. Do we need to, other than just put that as an action or task for consideration? Okay. Right. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was brought up, wasn't it, when one of our committee raised that the maps provided, say at that last meeting, they were only of inside. So unless you knew where the nightclub was going to be, those diagrams of inside were of little use. They just showed us where the fire exits were. But we would have liked to have seen the actual location and showing the closeness to the residents who had complained. So we wanted the site in context. So in that respect, yes, we could do with a site visit, or we could have done with a different map. Just a comment.
Very good points, I might add. And yes, I do remember it coming up in discussion. Vicky's, nice to see your hand up. You wish to make some observations?
I was just going to say, if it helps, we can amend our report. Apologies, I'm suffering with a bit of a chest infection, so I have to keep removing myself from the screen whilst I cough, so apologies. If you're minded to, we're more than happy to amend the report that we take to the subcommittees to have more maps in it. That's not a problem at all.
Thank you very much. And I see this. Councillor Stevenson is nodding, Vicky. Okay, we now come to a conclusion of the proceedings, but there is 2 or 3 points that I do need to make. Firstly, this meeting was brought forward, if you remember, members, and subsequently in the last week or two, other things are obviously happening to the point where the next formal meeting, I think, was June or July, if I'm correct, Moira. So there will be a special meeting. At the moment, it's being provisionally proposed for the 4th of April, but that might need to be changed depending on circumstances. Is that correct, Moira? Or Ben?
Oh, sorry, do forgive me. Forgive me, I was just asking about the Thames Valley Police stuff. I missed that, and my bad.
What?
I missed what you just said. I was asking.
Oh,
about...
sorry, apologies. I was saying that it is initially proposed for the 4th of April for the next special meeting, because the scheduled one obviously is June, July period. But even that date is just a provisional one at the moment, and it's subject to other situations like availability of room and officers and reports being made available at that particular time and the closure of consultations and things, you know.
As of now, it is provisional. If you are all minded to agree the date here, it should be fine to go ahead. But like I said, officers will need to be able to get the reports in.
Councillor Marsh.
That particular week, it's in the middle of the Easter holidays. It's the week of Easter Monday. I don't think that really works, does it? Certainly not for those of us who've got children. It's not normally the case that the council holds meetings during school holidays, is it? People would be away and so forth. I mean, it's not trying to be awkward, but it's a bit of an odd week to have it.
I think we've also got to look at clashing with other meetings and availability of officers and even ourselves. But obviously, you've just identified a circumstance of an early Easter this year, because of course it is earlier this year.
If you just bear with me, we're having slight internet problems. I'm just checking the calendar to see whether there's any other dates that we could potentially offer. I don't know whether if the week after that would be sufficient for you, or again, it's open to the entire committee. So
I think the week after that I'm tied up. If I remember rightly, I think that was one of the reasons it was brought forward at that time.
Is it worth saying who else can make that date? Not wishing to preclude or exclude anybody, obviously.
What is this? Has other members got their diaries in front of them? Sorry?
I agree with Councillor Marsh.
You're tied up on that day.
they thought, sorry, what they thought. Yeah, I mean, I would be available.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing is that obviously we're trying to arrange a Monday, which is the most convenient day, and also the time.
Sorry, just looking at this as well. Yeah, no, I apologize. Looking at this, we've got the 4th of March. Would that be more acceptable?
Mention the 8th. Sorry. What did I thought I said March, the 4th of March, 4th of April.
So it could be the 8th of April, but we've got the 4th of March booked at the moment, like the council chamber booked.
Oh, okay. 4th of March. So that what does that clash with any other of your commitments?
I think, yeah, well, I think your apologies. There was a typo on the chairman's briefing with the 4th of April.
Should have been.
Like I said, apologies. It was meant to be the 4th of March on the chairman's briefing.
Okay, apologies that I should have picked that up, Ben. But so at the moment, it looks as if it's Councillor Stevenson that can't make the 4th of March. What about your good self, Councillor Jeffrey?
I'm just going to make a suggestion. I don't know, on our town council, most of these kinds of difficulties are done by doodle poll. Can we do that or some version of doodle poll? So actually find out which dates will work for people.
Except we're all here. We've got our diaries.
I mean, so far you're the only one, Councillor Stevenson, and is it a case that you might be able to join on Zoom, or are you going to be away during that week?
I'm sorry, I have committed myself from 5 till 6, and I don't want to let that group of people down. They may be only little rainbows, but they are very worthy citizens and need me.
Point taken. I think the only problem is that whatever date is fixed, there's going to be at least one or two of us that are not going to be able to make it. So, you know, I think from the point of view of fixing a date for the diary for Ben to get the necessary arrangements, we do need to be pretty quick on the arranging
Chairman, if we can't, what I'll do is after this meeting, I can send out an email with several dates and we can try and find the best.
I think that makes sense because diaries fill up all the time, don't they?
Yeah.
So we're here now. That's the date that suits me.
If that's the case, Ben, I think you need to just give us 2 or 3 days to make a decision.
Sorry, Chairman, I think what the Vice Chairman was saying there is it's probably best if we all put in for the 4th of March.
You prefer to agree it now, and if that's the case, I'm prepared from the chair to say yes. Fair enough.
Yes.
4th of April, 4th of March. It's never a runner. Okay, if we can move forward, I'm just looking quickly at Councillor Vickers. Does that meet your agreement?
Yeah, just put something in the chat. Yeah, fine with me. Okay.
Well, thanks very much for that, Ben. Sorry that it's taken a few minutes to come to a conclusion. Yeah, I think, remember, we did agree that this time specifically to allow members to go to their respective town council or parish council meetings starting at 7:30, and we're 6 o'clock and I've got to get to Reading for 7:30. So obviously I'd be pleased to quickly conclude the proceedings. But before I do, I'd like to just mention on behalf of the committee to officers, perhaps we can send our good wishes to Julia because, you know, we recognise that one of your important members of the team has been off sick for a while, and we obviously wish her speedy recovery, and then let's hope she can be back doing her efficient job that she's done so well in the past. Were you able to pass that on either Vicky or Sean to Julia? Thanks very much, appreciated. That point at 18:05, I formally close this licensing committee meeting. Thanks very much for your attendance. Thanks very much for your assistant officers.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you.
So.